Hello, everyone. Welcome to The Torch. I'm Jake.
And I'm Kimberly.
And this week, we have the one, the only, Matthew Fehling as our guest.
Welcome, Matt.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, Matt Fehling, for the last 24 years, has dedicated his career to ensuring BBB remains a relevant and trusted source. Prior to joining BBB serving the Pacific Southwest, formerly the Greater Arizona BBB, in 2004 as Executive Vice President and being appointed to President CEO in 2006, Matthew served in several roles across the country, including with the Council of Better Business Bureaus. Leading the largest BBB in the country, his voice is heard on a national level while serving on the CBB Board of Directors. Matthew is a board member for Coyotes Charities and is past president of the Valley of the Sun Kiwanis Club. He earned a Bachelor of Science degree from Virginia Commonwealth University's School of Mass Communications. Welcome, Matt.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Pretty impressive resume there.
Okay, if you say so, I'll take it.
Talk to us a little bit. I mean, Jake and I know quite a lot about you, we think.
You think?
But nobody listening, they might not know about you. So we want to find out. We always start at the beginning, and we'd love to find out a little bit about where you grew up and go from there.
Go to the roots.
The roots. Well, I was born in Lafayette, Indiana, just outside or perhaps even on the campus of Purdue. I don't recall being born, but that's where my birth certificate tells me I was born, as well as my parents told me. Lived in Indiana till I was about 3, I believe it was, and then we moved to Illinois. So I was in a manufacturing town in the early 70s through mid-80s called a town called Danville. Heister, Bone, T-Peck, Lahoff, Quaker Oats, General Motors, Pepsi. Bunch of kind of processing assembly line type of businesses in the middle of corn and soybean fields. So right on the border of Illinois, Indiana, small town, ride your bike, from dusk till dawn. 3 feet of snow, uphill both ways to school, that sort of thing. Beautiful summers, beautiful falls, springs, 4 seasons, but very, very small. Basketball, baseball, kind of, all-America, apple pie kind of thing. So
I remember we were talking about Stephen King once, and you told me that basically, like, your childhood was like Stranger Things and like it, and like those kids, like.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
The neat thing watching that was just like it and my wife, who was from Sweden, grew up in the similar, same time frame, and obviously, yet obviously different because Sweden, United States. But yeah, it just reminds me of my childhood and how we went to school and how we interacted with each other and how the older kids kind of had this pecking order and took care of the younger kids, but at the same time kind of made their life very difficult. So yeah, I'm used to. There wasn't a safety zone that I think exists today for people growing up. But at the same time, it wasn't bad. It was fun. So, but then I moved to Virginia when I was 14. So right before I started high school, moved to Virginia, little suburb of Richmond, Virginia, and spent the rest of my days there. Graduated high school, went to college, first job, that sort of thing, all in Virginia. So I kind of had the Midwestern upbringing combined with the kind of Southern upbringing. So it's interesting. I can kind of turn on the Southern charm or kind of the Midwestern, humility, depending on the circumstance.
Okay.
2 things about Matt. I don't detect any sort of accent, like no Midwestern accent. I mean,
I don't know. You tell me.
I just always notice that about people from the Midwest. Like, he doesn't have an accent because he's a man of the people from all over the country. But my question for Matt is, do you consider yourself a Hoosier?
Was born in Indiana, so absolutely. Will always be a Hoosier. But I was a Boilermaker fan, so, we are the, what Bob Knight calls us, the crazies of Indiana. So, yeah. We don't recognize Notre Dame as being from the state of Indiana.
Boo. We always get into this. We won't do this today.
Yeah.
It's Michigan, Indiana, Illinois.
Chicago.
But you're from Illinois, too.
Yeah, I know. But it's the joke for Purdue fans. People from,
So
Indiana. It's like Notre Dame fans don't even know what state Notre Dame's in.
So sad.
Yeah.
So, Matt, what did you want to be when you grew up?
It's a great question. I don't know, and I ask my kids that, sometimes just to see what they say, and, I hear my answers today even because I still don't know what I want to be when I grow up, right? I really don't. I don't I didn't have anything other than I played a lot of sports. So I think you always have those dreams about maybe taking it to the next level. But I was never the best. I was always good and always kind of, right there, I would be maybe the second or third pick, never the first pick, when the teams were kind of divvied out. So I just kind of ran out of talent athletically, as most people do, because there's very few spots for professional athletes. But I don't think that drove me. It didn't. It wasn't an obsession, and I think probably that's why, one of the reasons I didn't make it was I didn't have that obsession. I didn't really have. I just, my mom was always talking about be a good citizen, that, and she was in the public schools, speech pathologist. So she would always talk about just, being a good citizen, and then I would see my dad, get up and go to work, and what he did. So I mean, it just, I kind of was always around, kind of, the middle class. Full-time job was a necessity, and so if you're going to do something good, and kind of looked into this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Was education a big part of that? Like,
oh yeah, it wasn't a question of whether or not you were going to college; it was where you were going to go to college, and so I took quite the circuitous route to get my degree. But it was never a question; it was just kind of stated, and yet I didn't feel that pressure, which is kind of. Some of my friends, I think, felt the pressure to get into an Ivy League school or the engineering school of their choice or this. And for me, it was just, hey, just going to college. Just go to college. It was just kind of part of who my brother and I, were and who we were raised to be.
What'd you study in college?
Well, I can't. No, I'm kidding. My degree is in mass communications, and there's a public relations track. And so I was at Virginia. I graduated from Virginia Commonwealth, but I started at Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia. Was there about 3 semesters, and just was wasting money, in my opinion, because I didn't know what I wanted to do, and thought I wanted to get into advertising. So I transferred to James Madison. But to take you back to the days of pre-internet, I had an old course book that somebody had given me from, probably 5 years old. I just assumed, why would they change anything? So when I showed up after my transfer to James Madison in Harrisonburg, Virginia, which is in the middle of nowhere, beautiful campus, great school, the major that I wanted was no longer there. And yeah, so, I didn't do my research ahead of time, obviously, that was a life lesson. So I stayed there for 2 whole semesters and just plodded through some more general studies courses, and then said, you know what, I'm, again, wasting money. This is just not a good use of money. And so I took a semester off, moved back home with parents, and found a job at an engineering firm, which, right, I think a friend of mine had a job there and said, hey, you should come work here. Okay, why not, engineering had nothing to do with what I wanted to do, so why not go work there?
What'd you do there?
Concrete inspection.
Okay.
So I would take wheelbarrows of concrete. Every 100 cubic yards, we would take a wheelbarrow and fill it, and then do a number of tests and let cylinders cure on site. And so what you did then was there was a specific way that you had to collect the samples. And then you would go back a couple of days later to pick up your box, your cured, or, not cured, but set. There would be set cylinders, and so you'd pick up the set of 4 or 8, 12, whatever it was, because 4 for every 100 cubic yards, take it back to the lab. From there, you would mark them and put them in a wet room, and then take another card out for the day's breaks, and then mark down the PSI at which the concrete kind of cracked. But you'd cap them with molten sulfur. It had huge biceps, the amount of concrete cylinders that you had to pick up. But one of the jobs was at Virginia Commonwealth University, which is in Richmond, which is across the river from where I grew up. And it's a whole different world. It was an awesome school. It was just very urban. There wasn't really a campus to speak of at the time. Very eclectic. It was an art school. A lot of musicians and artists and sculptors and, you name it. And although I was none of those things, all those things really intrigued me, and decided this is where I want to go to school. I don't even care what I studied. This is what I want to go to school. As luck would have it, they had a program with advertising, and so through mass communication. So I began work to get into that school and got in, yet decided pretty early on that advertising wasn't for me. and really was drawn to public relations.
Mm-hmm.
So there was broadcasting, public relations, news writing, and advertising were the 4 tracks that you could kind of select under this school of mass communications. So I took the public relations track, thinking the proximity to D.C. might work for some politicians, these sorts of things, and just fell in love with it and did that for 3 years. So was on a 3-university and almost 6-year plan to get my 4-year degree. So
It worked out well for you, though, Matt.
it worked. It worked. There's more of the kind of bouncing around, right? But yeah, it was fun.
You started your career with BBB as an intern, right?
I did.
Can you talk about those early days and kind of work your way up to becoming president and CEO?
Yeah. And it's funny because I truly don't feel that different from that kid that walked through the doors 24 years ago, 25 years ago, who knows? Somebody's going to get a calculator out to figure that out. I needed a 3-credit internship to graduate. It was the last thing I needed, and those didn't pay. And I made comment to my internship coordinator, who said, yeah, some of them do. Oh, well, then put me down for one that does. And he said, well, it may take longer, but we'll get you one. Okay, great. Semester comes and goes and didn't get one. Summertime, July, I believe it was, phone rings. I'm at my little 1-bedroom apartment and middle of the city, pick it up and hey, the Better Business Bureau needs an intern. I said, who? The Better Business Bureau. What's that? Right? 21 years old. I didn't know what it was. 22 years old, probably, actually. No, shoot, I don't even know how old I was at that point. Right? If I was on the 6-year path, I was probably 24, 1990. Yeah, I was 24. So I said, well, sure, love to. Don't care who it is. So what do I need to do? And walked through the doors and interviewed, and just the next day I was there helping out with a newsletter. They had lost somebody, to a different career right in the middle of a big project, and they needed somebody who really understood how to do newsletter layout and design, and that was about it. I didn't really need anything else. So I was 15 years younger than the next person in the office, and the CEO, the boss of that organization, just kind of took me under his wing and treated me like a 5th son. He had 4 kids already. His oldest was just a few years younger than myself, and so I think he saw his oldest in me and just gave me every opportunity. And within 3 months I was full time, and within another 3 months I'm doing this, and another 3 months I'm doing that. Next thing you know, what had been kind of 3 separate jobs are all rolled up into one job that I had, that were one salary, one very low-paid salary. But I was a kid. I didn't know any better, and I didn't know any different. I wouldn't change it for the world. And I made nothing, but I needed nothing. I needed nothing. I made nothing plus $1, and that's all I needed, right? And so I could pay rent. I could eat. I think rent at the time was $300 a month, and I was splitting it with 2 other people. So my share was like $100 a month. What do you need, right? So it was a fun time, and I got exposed to everything over 5 years, and whatever I would ask, my inquisitiveness would be met with an opportunity, right? I'd say, what about this? And he'd say, go learn it. Here you go. Go sit with, or I'm going to give you this as a responsibility. And he was a wonderful, wonderful guy to work for in that regard. Still a friend. He retired a couple years ago, and I still, see him once a year, and really admire him, and am grateful. So those first 5 years, I did everything, and we were a smaller office. And when I say I did everything, it's not like I'm not trying to imply I ran the place, because I did anything but. I basically, fixed everything from the soda machine to the fax machine to the computers to the automated voice response system, to learned how to handle customer complaints, to devise public relations strategies, to handle accounts payable, to just on down the line. Just got exposed to everything, and so it was a great introduction into business. And so when my friends were kind of like, how much you don't make enough money, and I'd say, you don't have enough responsibility. Like, you're going in and answering the phones, and you got to sign out to pee. And I can do whatever I want, whenever I want. I got a key to the place. I'm here in the mornings and the nights and the weekends. And you know what? Like, this is going to serve me well. In 5 years, I've got a resume that is just like dynamite. It would take them a career to get just the exposure, right? Not the expertise. I'm not trying to imply any of that, but it was fun. It was fun. So that what I remember most was just the variety. I remember how slow the computers were. I had 3 computers, and so I'd print a draft of a newsletter and at 8 o'clock in the morning and hope that it would be done in draft mode by 5 p.m.
Oh.
I'd have a dumb terminal that I'd be running a report on that was pulling everything out of the database. So as soon as you hit run, it would take 2 hours to generate the report, and you better hope it was right because you couldn't even debug it until 2 hours.
Oh, man.
Right, yeah. And then I had another one, which we would, if I ran something else and it locked up, I would just sit there in my office and stare. And so the other thing was, instead of sitting there, I would get up and go. And I kind of learned that from hospitality, right? It was that old saying, and that you got time to lean, you got time to
clean.
Yeah, that's right. So, I'm like sitting there at my desk, 3 computers are locked. I can't answer the phone because I can't help anybody because I can't access to a computer. So I'd get up and I'd go into Mr. G's office and I'd say, Mr. G, and he'd say, Mr. F. What do you got for me? He's like, why aren't you working? Well, 3 computers locked up. Oh, okay. Why don't you go help Keith in sales? Okay, what does that mean? Well, there's a bunch of, past due invoices, might get on the phone and give those guys a call. Oh, wow. All right. I can do that. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. He'll train you to do that. So I'd get sales training. I'd get, that sort of thing. So it was fun. Instead of him saying, oh, go get a broom or go get a, Windex and wash the windows, which I guess he could have said. He would instead say, well, why don't you go help over here? Why don't you go do that? So I learned a lot that way. So that was 5 years of that. And it was kind of it was better than the 6 I spent in college.
At a certain point, you come out to the west side, right? You come out to Colorado.
The West Coast.
The West Coast.
Yes.
So I had, after 5 years of doing kind of all of that, there was only so much more I could do. So, I'd been flirting with the idea of working for our Council of Better Business Bureaus, which was just up I-95 in Arlington, Virginia. I finally caved, and Mr. G, Thomas J. Gallagher, said to me, hey, I'm hurt. Why didn't you talk to me? I said, well, because the 3 other times that I've come to you with an offer, you've talked me out of it. And I knew you'd talk me out of this one. And I didn't want you to talk me out of it, so I had to take it. He said, I respect that. So I began working for our council, and it was just a different environment. It was just different, and it wasn't all that. It no longer, I was going from a team of 18 to a team of 110. And so I was going from the ability to do everything to going to, this is your job. This is what you do from 8 to 5, period, end of story. And when I would be inquisitive, people would just be like, yeah, well, don't worry about that. And I understand why, but it still didn't sit well with me. So I quit, and I had met my now wife, and we had talked about moving to the West Coast. And my folks had moved to Denver. So we thought about, hey, we'll go to San Francisco, Los Angeles, Portland, Seattle. We'll hit somewhere on the West Coast. Let's stop in Denver. We'll drive out. We'll stop in Denver, stay with my folks for 3, 4, 5 months, just kind of, mooch off them while we're trying to figure out our lives. And went in, turned my 2 weeks, and they said, why? And I said, well, I'm going to go to Denver. And they said, well, why don't you just work for us from home? And this was kind of the beginning of the work at home revolution, work from home, not work at home, And so how would that look? And worked with them to set up, the phone system and everything. And so I worked out of my house, and we ended up staying in Denver because we loved it. Ended up staying there for almost 5 years. But I worked for the council out of my house from Denver from 2000 to 2003. So almost 3 years to the day, I would have like a 15-foot commute. And my wife would have to drive in, 10 miles to, through the snow to her job. And I would just go, there's my commute. And so, I'd have lunch with a buddy of mine, on this day, and I'd go into the Denver BBB and work out of their server room on this day. And I would just find different people to bug and bother. And, the cat and my dog, and the mailman would just run because he didn't want me to stop and talk to him. I'd be so bored. But I did get to work with a lot of other BBBs, and I got to meet a lot of people, and I got to basically make friends with people across the United States and Canada because they were our customers. So the job that I had was to support other BBBs and kind of get them get their processes all lined up, because back then you might have a database for your call center, you might have a database for your financial system, you might have a database for your media, you'd have a database for this. And so we had developed a management information system that kind of brought all that under one system. And so my job was to work with people to kind of integrate that because of my background, having done so much for other BBBs. I mean, for the Richmond BBB, Central Virginia BBB. It was just a natural fit. So I traveled, did trainings on site, these sorts of things. And so again, I get to make a lot of friends, and the job was fun. It wasn't that challenging, frankly, but it was fun. And any job you throw in a scale, work from home, I can golf whenever I want. Started to golf, actually. That's when I started to golf. I was in Denver, be outside all the time. It was just like, there's that couple years where I was fine kind of just not accelerating, and I was fine but then I got a little itchy, and I had a conversation with the Denver CEO at the time who was like, well, I was going to ask you to come and maybe be the VP of operations, but I just you work for the council, I can't afford you. Just wait a minute. You don't know what they pay me? She said, well, how much do you make? I said, no. How much are you offering? And she said, let's go to lunch. And then, next thing you know, I was VP of operations for that BBB. And then kind of word got out, wait a minute, I didn't know you were looking for a job. And so I spent the next year kind of fielding these not so subtle inquiries about my willingness to move somewhere. And Phoenix just spoke to me. I came out, I'd been working with Phoenix as a client. And so I kind of made my way out here in 2004. So with the idea that I would be a candidate for the gal who recruited me out here, and a year and a half later,
you were here.
Yeah, well, a year later, probably after I started working for the Denver BBB, a year and a month.
Was it a hard sell for your wife to come somewhere this hot? No,
which you would think, right? She's from Stockholm. She grew up in Stockholm, but she came to the States for college. So, no, she actually was more excited about it than I was. I'm not all that thrilled. I haven't been here that long time. The summers don't bother me as much as they did the first 3 years, and I think that's about. I don't think they've ever bothered her.
Wow.
Which is strange, right? You would think that they would, but she loves it. She loves the heat and the warmth and kind of knows. I mean, I guess when you grow up in somewhere like Stockholm and Sweden, you're probably. Okay, enough snow. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I really don't need it. And Virginia didn't have a lot of snow, but Denver did, I mean, although it was an interesting, Denver weather was great. It just, there was snow and there was cold. And here, we complain when it's in the 40s, right? The 2 times a year it dips down into the 40s. We all freak out.
So you're a good example of the story of sort of starting at the bottom and working your way up the ladder, which is different from, I think, a lot of people in my generation who kind of want to be entrepreneurs and be their own bosses.
Yes.
Millennials don't really want to put in their 30 years at one job. We kind of want to have our options open. So what do you think as the president of a multi-generational staff about the differences in how we view work? And how do you make an organization as established as the BBB attractive to younger talent?
Well, great question. It's multi-layered. So let's start to peel the onion, right?
All right.
I would largely disagree that there is a huge difference with the millennials coming into work with folks that went into work when I was a millennial, when I was the same age as a millennial, which I'm not. I don't know how to phrase that, but if that makes sense. When I started, I shared that I was able to do all that stuff, so I didn't start at the bottom and work my way up in the same traditional sense. It wasn't a ladder. It was I had an inquisitiveness that was met, and I think that's what millennials have. They want to know why. They want to be a part of it. Want to know why. It was easier at the smaller organization for my boss to see my enthusiasm and go, well, hell, this kid can work for nothing. I don't got to pay him, right? And so instead of giving him more peanuts, I'll give him more space. I'll give him more this. So I had an incredibly varied and diverse, job. But it was always to do your job, right? This is what you're required to do. Once you do this and do it well, then I'll let you. I never once said, okay, I'm bored with this, give me that, which I think, again, not every one of my friends went into jobs like that. They would go in and they would work. They would have a ladder. They would have, this ladder, very clear, this stairwell or whatever you want to call it, that they would climb up. And I didn't. I just had the intrinsic reward that I got was there. So anyway, what I'm going with this is I think that millennials, and a lot of millennials, and I think it's just now you see it more because, you didn't have Facebook, Instagram, we didn't live our lives online. Gen X was kind of behind the scenes. We were really good at playing the game and putting on the uniform and then doing whatever we wanted, and nobody had any, what I mean? I am so glad that there was no Instagram, YouTube, Facebook. I'm just so glad. I am. And, but it's here now. So we see it. And I think people respond to that in my generation. Like, oh, I worked. Well, I did. I wouldn't get paid a lot, but I got exposed to a lot of things. So one of the things that I try to do, and you guys work here, so you can tell me if we are successful at it. I think one of the things that we try to do is allow people to be exposed to other areas of their jobs, other areas of the organization than just their jobs, if that makes sense, right? So if you are in the dispute resolution, customer, conciliation and engagement, arena, and you are interested in this, you can have an opportunity to, nobody's going to tell you no. But here's the job that we expect you to do. Do it, and then you can maybe help out over here. Then maybe you can get exposed to these things over here. I'm a huge believer in people in hiring from within and promoting from within, because I think that shows everybody else in the team that there are opportunities. But then it's the empowerment as well. So it's giving people, roles and responsibilities that may be outside the norm of their job description, which I'm not a big fan of those, or employee handbooks or any of that, right? I mean, I think that so to me, from a multi-generational, I think the difference is how we communicate, right? And so or not how we communicate, but what the vehicles we use for communication. And by that, there was a guy, George Shell, who was chief legal counsel at Coca-Cola, who I sat on a board with for a while, and he was a really, really intelligent guy, really smart man. And he used an example of multi-generational communication in email. And he said to me, you have you have somebody from the greatest generation on your staff all the way down to digital, right? Or native, right? Digital native. So that's digital native, millennial, XY, baby boomer, greatest generation, right? So you can have all that here. So think about email for the greatest generation. And we said this 5 years ago, so you got a -5. But when did email become a standard part of business communication?
Early 2000s.
Bingo. When did that person go into the workforce, right?
50s?
60s probably, right? Yeah. So now you've got 40 years without it and 10 years with it. So, right? A native, what's email? So, right? They're the same, almost the same. The native and so the 18-year-old and let's say the 70-year-old are both looking at email like, what is this? And then you got Gen Xers who are like, maybe baby boomers who still think this is newfangled technology, right? And you have Gen Xers who are kind of like in the middle, right? It's kind of new. I know I shouldn't use it. It's not cool anymore. I need, and so I should be texting more. And so anyway, email is seen as either a new technology or an antiquated technology of the same workforce. And it goes for how you communicate with people, how you speak to people. And I think, what one of the challenges is just to make sure that everybody respects that everybody's coming from a different spot, everybody has different experiences, everybody has different backgrounds. And I think when you create that, when you kind of ensure that people know that respect and understanding that other people are bringing everybody on the team is there for a reason. They're bringing something to the table. Then I think that appeals to everybody, regardless of whether they're millennial or not. So I don't like to really carve out millennials and say this is what they need and nobody else needs it. It's kind of like if they need it, kind of everybody needs it, right? It's a basic human thing, and people are inquisitive and they want to know why. And the more we share why, so I think, why do we do what we do? Why do we exist? What's our purpose? What's your role? Why do you exist? Why do we ask you to do that? When you can explain those things along the way, it helps. Now, there's times when it's like, because I said so, just go do it. And so you have to respect that too. You have to have people on the team that kind of know this and will do it. But you can't go to that too often, right? You just can't. I mean, well, I guess you could. You would just have to have the team in place that could accept that. And I think that's a smaller subset of the population.
It's interesting to hear you say it because we also see it on a daily basis of you do always challenge people to ask why and think more about why we do this. Don't just do it because it's been done this way. You have a reputation of being basically a maverick in the entire system because you've always been pushing forward and you've been trying to, I know, probably sometimes drag other, the movement forward and the relevance and the entire brand. Your vision is really far out there and it's taking root here in Phoenix and in San Diego. And it's really important, I personally think, for the BBB brand because it is a 100-plus-year-old brand. So I guess where have your ideas come from? Like, what's inspired your vision? It's a really high-level question. But
yeah. No, it's a great question. So my job, I have what I would consider one of the best jobs that a person could have who is inquisitive, who is like me and is inquisitive, because I get to work with board members, business leaders, civic leaders, and whose sole job is to ensure my success. Because if I'm successful, the organization's successful. So I get a boardroom of personal and professional supporters that are amazing. And these guys and gals, men and women, of all ages, of all backgrounds, of all industries, share ideas, concerns, thoughts. They challenge me. They don't just show up and, have coffee and donuts and go home. I mean, these are people that actually have tremendous ideas and have wonderfully run businesses. And they're able to kind of get with me and kind of just sit down and really get deep about why we exist, because Better Business Bureau is a mission. It's a theory. It's in the ether, right? We exist to make business better. We exist to elevate the marketplace. We exist to have consumers and sellers trust each other. We exist to build a community of trustworthy businesses. Right? None of these things are off the shelf. None of them. And so everything we do, every service that we offer, every product that we roll out needs to advance that mission, one of those kind of feelings, right? And so they work with me. If what we're doing doesn't do it as well as something else, then why are we doing it?
Mm-hmm.
Challenge that. Challenge. Why? What's the reason? What's the purpose? And so many people, it's so hard. They get this role and they go, we got to do what we're doing better. And I understand that, right? And it's process improvement, and it's great. It's not CEO level stuff. It's not. But, it's what they know. And some of them are insanely good at it. I mean, there are some people who are just that are my colleagues that are insanely good at that stuff. But they're not thinking future, they're thinking current, and so it's not bad. But like you say, to bring people in to a new way of thinking, you have to pull them. You can't push them. And so, yeah, you get out there pretty far. You get too far afield, and you can't throw a lifeline because you're just way up there, right? So yeah, I'm constantly having to stop and kind of take a pulse of some key stakeholders in the BBB system to make sure that they're aligned. And there's a handful that I think are forward thinking, and we challenge each other. So I think that it just comes from incredibly supportive and successful and business leaders, right? These are people that are doing it and just then challenging, just trying, just keep testing, just keep doing. I was talking with some folks the other day, and I said one of the most dangerous things that I keep hearing uttered is people come to the BBB for and fill in the blank. People expect when they come to the BBB, fill in the blank. And I said that is such a dangerous way to look at things when you're in our position. We need to say people find the BBB. And when they do, we have the opportunity to fill in the blank. And you think about it in those terms, you stop being so chained to your current offerings, right? So when people file a complaint with the BBB, they expect to get a result. Well, okay, maybe. Or, when people find the BBB, when they have a dispute, BBB has the opportunity to, boom, it changes kind of, our positioning in the whole thing. And it's, I wouldn't say people even come to us for disputes all the time. They're coming to us for a multitude of reasons. Their business is looking for help. Their people looking for help. Everybody's coming looking to have a question answered or validated, an opinion validated. We exist to kind of really help in that evaluation stage, whether that's an evaluation of a product or service or an idea or an opportunity. That's our kind of, right, that's our center kind of, that's what we own. And that's what we need to be mindful of, is how do we contribute to that? And so, I'm a rabbit hole guy, right? So I think I'm down a rabbit hole here. But to go all the way back to kind of what's the impetus for it or why or how, I would just say it's just being mindful of and tapping into and just, in a way, respectful of the people who really own the BBB, and that's the board of directors and the business community, not me, right? I'm here just to make that logo mean something and make sure that it's as meaningful as it can be.
So when we moved to this campus,
yes,
you had a vision for what the BBB needs to be doing going forward for us here in Phoenix and for San Diego. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. BBB, again, as an entity, we exist. We really have two customers, right? We have the consumers who come and use us and potential purchasers and evaluators that use our services to, again, make sure that they're making a good decision, help them in that decision-making process. We don't charge for any of those services. That's free. Those are supported by the businesses that support us, our accredited businesses or our members. They give us money to do what we do and to advance this mission. Yet as members, as accredited businesses, they should be getting assistance as well. So the concentration shouldn't only be on consumer services, right? It should be on business services as well. So we've largely ignored that as a system. I think largely ignored that as a collective. I wouldn't say that we've largely individually ignored that, but we've largely ignored that as a collective. The collective has been around the dispute process, how we rate companies, what opportunities we have to engage, online. They're very consumer centric. And I would argue, because I firmly believe this, that a consumer that's looking for help and validation or validation doesn't care if you're in Indiana, India, California, or Arizona. They want help quickly and efficiently. And if you can do that, then there's no, well, gosh, if you weren't in Indiana and you were in Arizona, you could have helped me. No, they don't care. You give them the help, you give them the validation, and it's right, and it's good, and it's meaningful. They will come back, and they will use this again. That could be done from anywhere. The business community needs us locally. They need us and want us to be around, right? That's where we need to double our efforts. That's where we need to concentrate. And again, we cannot, this isn't a zero sum. This isn't an either or. This isn't a okay, we have to take away 5% of our resources on consumer need and put them into business. This can and should be happening concurrently. So this vision is creating a place that welcomes businesses to come in and say, these are the resources and tools that we have for you. And it's the kind of the idea is still in its infancy. We're still, we're maybe in the toddler stage. But the idea is that we provide resources and tools for businesses And one of them can be physical space. One of them can be meeting rooms. One of them can be training rooms. One of them can be co-work space, collaboration, where all these collisions are happening between, maybe, a company who's doing a training here with some people that are co-working with, BBB staff, all meeting in the town square for lunch. And just some beautiful collisions are happening of ideas, of theories, of, help, of, future relationships. So, that idea of community and building community, is happening here. And we will be bringing this to the California region, Southern California region, and we have, begun to do it in some of the other areas in Arizona as well. So, in Lake Havasu and Yuma and in Prescott, we've begun to deploy some of these strategies as well.
Going off of that, I think we're in this great sort of exciting moment in time where we're seeing all these new industries pop up all over the place because of this confluence of, like a strong economy, new technologies, changing cultural values. This is a podcast for entrepreneurs put on by the Better Business Bureau. So I guess my question is, why is it important that these rising business leaders conduct business in an ethical way?
Trust is kind of the bedrock of the free enterprise system, right? It's as basic as if I hand you a green rectangle with a president on it, that you can take it to the bank or to the store and get goods for it or put it in your savings account, right? You trust that. It's that simple. And so when you do things wrong, you lose trust. And the more people lose trust in business, the more regulation comes down, the more things cost, And so to instill that in the very beginning, that it's a long game. And, businesses and entrepreneurs can be up against it sometimes, they can be really up against it. They can be all in, all sunk in, and just, feel their back against the wall and have the choice to do the right thing or the wrong thing. The right thing, is going to be good for 3 years from now. The wrong thing is going to be good for the next 3 months. They may need to make payroll. They may, they may be compelled and feel like they need to do something wrong. If we can get in there and say, no, here's how you can, look, it's going to be better for you 3 years from now. You're going to be around. If you take the shortcut, you might not. I think it's important. So entrepreneurs and people in kind of, in startup phase or kind of, early business development stage, they can be vulnerable to taking the wrong path. And again, trust. Business is good, and we believe that business should provide solutions, and businesses shouldn't be the cause of problems in our society. If business creates problems in our society, there'll be more regulation, there'll be less room for new business growth, there'll be, so you've got to look at this as an opportunity to really affect behavior and get people to buy into it. And I would tell you guys, and you probably know this, and how many people have you actually met that are, in business, whether they're starting a business, whether they're 10 years into a business or 50 years into a business? How many of them have you met where you're like, that guy, that gal wakes up every day figuring out how to screw somebody over? Very few, very few. So the more you can reinforce that, the more you can reinforce, look, not only are you not trying to screw somebody over, but here's how you do it in a way that will foster trust, that will create, a reputation for you and your business, your personal brand and your business brand as a person of integrity that people want to help out when your back's against the wall.
Assume positive intent. Isn't that something you say?
Yeah, that's we are a team that assumes positive intent. It's kind of the idea that nobody can. You never know, even if somebody's in a bad mood or even if somebody snaps at you or isn't nice to you. It's probably nothing you did. It's probably something happened that morning or that afternoon, and you just happen to be the next person on the call list, right? Or you just happen to be the next person that they walk into. So, I try to diffuse situations, not pour gas on them. That's something that we tell our team too. They can be mad at the process all they want. They can be screaming mad, hopping mad at the process all they want. But don't take it personal. Now if they make it personal, which you might imagine has happened once or twice at the BBB. We have processes for dealing with that, and we don't expect people. And I would tell a business the same thing. If you're any business, you don't have to deal with customers who are personally attacking you. But if they're attacking your policies, let them, because sometimes they're right. Not always. The customer's not always right, but sometimes they are. So make sure you listen to them.
A complaint is an opportunity to find a good solution.
Absolutely. And it right, every problem is an opportunity for a creative solution. And a complaint, to get very BBB technical here, a complaint that comes to us, I tell a company will call me, or I'll meet somebody at a meeting. Oh yeah, you guys send me all these complaints. And I say, no. You send us all these complaints. Your customers are, I'd much rather be out, teaching, financial literacy on a military base than having somebody, handle your complaints. But the idea is we get them to the business as quickly as we can so that they can take care of it, because that's when you can create a return customer. They'll always remember you when you took care of a problem. If you make it impossible to take care of a problem, then they will remember that too. But they remember problems. People remember challenges that they had and problems that they have. They don't remember everything that's great. If you drive into work and the traffic's good and it's easy, and you don't really remember much of that drive. It's just, it happened. Now you're happy that it wasn't, gridlock, and you're happy that there weren't, 5 rubberneck accidents. But you remember when you drive by and there's a barbecue, or there's, 3 police on motorcycles that pulled people over, or there's you didn't move for 3 exits, in 15 minutes. You remember that. It's like, oh, so we remember those things that are painful to us. So when you're a business and there's an opportunity, even if it wasn't your fault, you can create a lifetime customer, so there's something to be said for, grabbing people and teaching them a lot of these things right when they begin, or just reinforcing them, I should say. A lot of this, it's probably a little bit arrogant to think that we would be teaching it. I think it's probably more appropriate to say that we're just reinforcing it and reminding people of it.
Having said all that, do you have any tips for aspiring entrepreneurs?
No. I don't know that I have tips, in the startup stages, other than you tap into your resources, your networks, look for things. The thing that I think I see more than anything is be ready to scale, and make sure that you're ready to scale, because that's where we see the most problems, is when you're at that growth stage where your demand begins to outpace your ability to either produce or respond to an issue that may come up, right? So, we've experienced that at the BBB, I'm not ashamed to say. And, as we've grown, when do you sink costs into customer service? When do you sink costs into more production? That's where I think businesses at that point, when they're starting to scale up, that's when they really run into problems, or that's when they can run into problems. But when you're starting out, just tap into every resource available to you. Look for mentors, look for supporters, champions, look for resources, make sure people know what you're doing, why you're doing it, and just stick with it.
So the last question we have for you, Matt, is what are you looking forward to the most in the upcoming year for sleep, for you personally, and for BBB serving the Pacific Southwest?
What am I looking forward to the most in the coming year?
Or what are you excited about?
What I'm excited about is the likelihood that a lot of our initiatives and our ideas that we've begun here will begin to really cement and really take shape. There's a lot that we're doing that is still a bit it's new, right? I said we're still in the infancy. We might be in the toddler stage at this point, and so you don't have everything quite formed yet. We don't have all of our ideas, documented, and we're still figuring out the best way to do certain things. So I'm really excited about a lot of the initiatives that we've started, like Ignite, Sparked by BBB taking shape, like the Business and Community Center getting really more formalized, bringing these ideas to Southern California, the expansion that we can have, and just the community that we're building. So I'm really excited about seeing a lot of things take shape that, we've started and look like they're going to be wonderful. So I'm looking forward to not being in startup mode ourselves with a lot of these projects, right? So, yeah.
Matt, it's been great having you on the show. We really appreciated the conversation.
Yes, thank you. World's best boss right here. We're not just saying it because there's a payday coming up soon. It's actually true. Matt is an awesome boss and an even better leader.
I appreciate that, and I appreciate what you guys are doing and seeing this stuff come to fruition, right? And, I've listened to a number of the podcasts and really impressed. You guys do great work. So thank you, too, for what you do. And to everybody listening or anybody listening, feel free to reach out to BBB. We're always happy to help. And if we can't help you, we'll tell you who can.
We are so lucky to have had Matt on the show. He's a busy man, and we appreciate him taking the time to have a conversation with us. It's never difficult to have a conversation with Matt because his inquisitiveness is ever present. He's always eager to share something new he's learned about, and he does it with an enthusiasm that is uniquely contagious. It's great to hear from your CEO about what fuels them, and it sort of stirs your own passions about the work you do as an individual in the organization. I know I'm very humbled by Matt's story, and I hope you, dear listener, have also been inspired in some way. Registration is now open for BBB's 2019 Integrity Golf Classic. Players can look forward to a fun day at the Maderos Golf Club in San Diego. The registration deadline is May 31st, so please register as soon as possible to ensure you and your foursome have a spot in the tournament, which is taking place June 6th. We're also looking for donors for raffle items as well as whole sponsors for the event. So, if you represent a community-conscious organization that would like to support our foundation's outreach initiatives, please visit golf.bbbcommunity.org and click on the sponsorship tab to see how you can get involved. That's golf.bbbcommunity.org. We hope you enjoyed the show, and if you did, please rate and review it anywhere you listen to podcasts. I want to remind you that if you have any questions, comments, concerns, or requests, you can send them to the Torch Podcast at bbbcommunity.org, and we will get back to you. See you next time, folks.